Welcome to the House of Hoosier podcast. I'm your host, AJ Guyton, and I'm here with my main man, Austin. Awesome interview with Spartan legend Mateen Cleaves last week. This week, it was an exciting game at Purdue. We were able to, sweep Purdue for the first time in a few years. But first, before I get started, Austin, I want to give a shout out to my daughter, whose team reached the downstate tournament Final Four. So she'll get a trophy this year for their efforts in high school basketball. They won their conference, they won their regional, they won their sectional and their super sectional in some thrilling low-scoring basketball games that I really do not want to watch ever again. But they got it done, man, and I'm so proud of her. Proud of you, Aaliyah. Keep going, and her teammates at Peoria High School. First time they've won it and been there ever to get a trophy as a girls basketball program. First time going downstate since, I think, 2001. So big shout out to them. And thank you for Obvious T-shirts, man. Send me a bunch of nice Indiana reflective representative shirts to wear on this podcast. I'm going to wear each and every one of them. I like to wear my Indiana gear after losses. I'm a little different. I love to represent my school. I hate when I see people with Green Bay Packers gear on. I'm like, when did you become a Green Bay Packer fan? Oh, man, we won last night. So you're supposed to wear your gear. If you're a fan, you wear your gear all the time. So I make it a point to rock any Indiana apparel, bright red here at University of Illinois Country on days that we lose. So people know I'm not a fair weather fan. And I'm not a guy who's just gonna rock it when I feel like we playing well. When we were in the Tom Crean beginning era, when we were 6-85, I still had on my Indiana gear, and I wore it proudly. So shout out to Obvious Tees for bringing me this gear, sending me this gear. You can go to Obvious Twitter handle at Obvious OBVIOUS _shirts. They've been around the game for about 7 years. They have over 50,000 followers. So, they got some nice, affordable apparel for people to rock and represent the Indiana University brand as well as the other brands as well. So thank you guys for that, man. How's your week been going, my man?
It's going well. Not as well as your daughter, I guess. Congrats to her. But hey, it's March. I'm doing better than I was 12 hours ago. I'll tell you that much. But the madness has arrived. It's the best month of the calendar year, and hey, hopefully it'll be a fun 31 days.
Absolutely, man. And like I said, man, I swear these high school games are so boring. Not, just simply because all of them play zone. They just sit in the zone and teams are stalling. Now you have to stall. There's no shot clock here in Illinois. Is there a shot clock in Indiana?
I'm not sure. There's not in Connecticut where I'm from, and everyone always complains about it. I want to say no, not in Indiana as well. But they got to fix that, I'm telling you. I mean, but hey, we're used to low-scoring games sometimes as IU fans lately, so you can get used to it. But I mean, hey, I can feel bad sometimes.
I just want to stay awake. That's all I ask. I mean, I think that's a fair assessment. You got these officials taking over the games, and then you got no shot clock. You got standing around in the zone. So, but shout out to all the teams in their respective states who've made that run, man. It's a positive thing, something they'll remember for their lifetime, man. So, but I want to jump into Indiana basketball. Obviously, tough loss last night. We'll get to that. But let's start with the Purdue win, man. They go into Mackey. They have a strategy. They have a strategy to make Zach Edey play defense. And I look at that as an opportunity for Mike Woodson to show that NBA experience. Because in the NBA, you explore mismatches and you don't go away from them. You don't do anything else. I think Zach Edey and the drop coverage with Jalen Hood-Schifino, with Trace Jackson Davis being an active roller. They stuck with it. They knocked down Jalen Hood-Schifino gave us 35 big points. We had 4 players in double figures. And even though Purdue out-rebounded us, we won the three-point battle. And I think that was obviously that's another great equalizer. And once again, I'm going to repeat, 4 players in double figures, man. Obviously, I really didn't think we had a chance to win that game going into that game. It's a tough environment, it's a tough team, but Mike Woodson, that's why they get paid the big bucks to come up with the strategies to give themselves a chance to win, and that's what they did. They exploited Zach Edey's inability to defend pick and rolls. As a coach, I hate drop coverage. I would never, I don't care who's on the floor, we're not playing drop coverage. I'd rather play a zone and play drop coverage and give people shots and give opportunities for good guards to make a heck of an impact. But we saw that strategy with Tyson Walker at Michigan State. They kind of were the first that I saw to really exploit the inability of Zach Edey to play defense in the pick and roll, and it worked. Did Michigan State win that game? I can't remember. I couldn't remember when at Michigan State against Purdue.
This year, I don't think so.
I
No.
think they did. I mean, they got to the end. They had a chance to win, and that was, I think, the first time it was really exploited. But from your perspective, I mean, life on campus, like life. What are your thoughts about how Indiana was able to dissect Purdue and win that game?
Man, they did it again. You didn't think it was possible. There was more confidence I had in that game. I just coming off of that Michigan State game, which was, I think, just emotionally so tough for everyone. And you didn't think Indiana would steal a win there. But the way they beat Purdue at home, they really dominated almost from start to finish. And it's just the ability. You have to like Zach Edey beat you, and that's fine. I mean, the improvement for him this year is insane, and there's a reason why he's the front runner for National Player of the Year. But other than that, if you give him, X number of points and you just play really well off of him, and you got to let the freshman guards beat you. It's as simple as that. If you're Indiana, you let Lawyer and Smith. They have to make their shots, and they didn't make them at Assembly Hall. And I know you got the crowd behind you this time if you're those guards, but you just got to make your shots, and that is not what happened. And Indiana, boy, that second half was fantastic. They came out hot and they made their shots. And even though everyone felt like they were in foul trouble, which was slightly concerning in that second half, Edey only with 26. I know Lawyer had 14, but I mean, Purdue only shot 35% from the floor, and you mentioned the way Jalen Hood-Schifino played, just moving off the ball. Every move that he made was the right one, and I mean, he's the reason why he's going to the draft next year. This was the game that basically stamped himself in the National Basketball Association for next year. 14 of 24 from the field, and I mean, Indiana, they made enough threes in that game. They made 7 of them, which is well above their season average, which was a good thing. And I mean, hey, if only one guy is above 15 points when you're playing Purdue, you give yourself a pretty good chance of winning the ball game. And you mentioned it was more than JHS. Galloway made some huge threes. Mike Woodson was really, really complimentary of him after the game. TJD got his 10, even though he was silent in the first half. I don't think had a single bucket, and yet still was, a few rebounds and assists away from a triple-double. So his presence was made known, and had a huge second half. And Miller Kopp with a couple of big threes as well. And once Indiana took the lead, I got worried that Purdue would somehow get back into it, and that's what never happened. They just keep plugging away. Jalen just whenever any time this year Indiana has needed a shot, Jalen has provided for them. And I mean, hey, credit to him. It was this game. He had told us he had circled on his calendar afterwards, and boy, he lived up to the expectation. And Indiana got that big road win. Everyone said that one win in that week would have been huge, and they got it in a big way to sweep the Boilers.
Absolutely. And you talked about the balance. I think as I'm beginning to really watch this team, Indiana team, and understand how they click and when they click well, having balance is the most important part of this offense. I know everybody, wants TJD to do the brunt of the lifting, but when this team can get 4 players in double figures, when they can get 13 out of Miller Kopp, when they get 35 from Jalen, when they can get 13 from Trey Galloway, who played an excellent game on both ends of the floor. And then on top of that, you shoot an efficient 7 of 15 from the 3-point line. I mean, this is the recipe for winning. If you can win, you can go into Purdue with those type of with that type of production and come out with a win. You can go into pretty much any environment and come up with a win. But it's hard to do that and hard to replicate every year. But that is the strategy. And you look on the flip side, you look at Purdue. They only had 2 players in double figures. And they were very inefficient as a team, and their backcourt's water was cut off. I mean, we talking 4 for 12, 2 for 11, 1 for 4, 1 for 5. I mean, that was a great job defensively by the Indiana coaching staff, putting that game plan together to cut the water off. Those freshmen, it was, it's always that good energy coming early in the season, but there's a thing called the wall. If you're not, a different type of freshman, you may hit that wall here and there, and freshmen tend to show inconsistency as well. So, I think it's starting to rear its head with Purdue because, Zach Edey's similar to Trace Jackson Davis. They really need that supporting cast to step up and play good basketball. They're just not going to win. I mean, you can have all the great coaching and defensive strategy in the world, but if you're not able to put up more than, 70 points, or you're not able to, get more than two players in double figures, you're simply just not going to win the game. Purdue shot 5 of 23 from three-point line. So that's only 15 points coming from three-point line. So we guarded the three-point line at a solid rate, and they had to hoist up shots that they normally would not want to take under the pressure. So, shout out to Mike Woodson and his staff for an excellent win. First time IU swept Purdue in 9 or 10 years. And that's a heck of a feat because that team was primed to win a Big Ten championship that night. I think they were really playing. I had an opportunity to keep Purdue from winning the Big Ten championship. So that's a heck of a consolation from not winning one yourself. It's like y'all ain't getting one. And that was a great big point of ours on senior night in our gym in 2000. It's like, no, we ain't get one, they ain't get one. We can all go into our careers going into the summer saying we didn't get one. But so you have a consolation in that. So great win. I was excited watching that basketball game. We scored 45 points in the second half, outscored Purdue 45-33 to win that basketball game. And it wasn't we didn't get out to a good start. That showed the mettle and the mental toughness that Indiana could possess whenever they feel like they put their mind to it, man. But with great news, we got sad news. We had an excellent outing at Purdue, man. Everybody was excited for a couple of days. Everybody was on Twitter talking their trash and doing what they do on Twitter. But then we had Iowa rolling in last night, man. I'm actually just start off with you, man. When you watched how we started that basketball game, what were your thoughts?
Here we go again. It's
Right.
as simple as that. For the second straight year after Indiana comes off its biggest win, last year it was beating Purdue at home for the first time under Mike Woodson with the fans back. And then this year, beating Purdue on the road is by far their biggest win by nearly double digits. And it's the same script over and over again. For some reason, I thought this game was supposed to be Thursday for the entirety of the week. And maybe the Indiana team did as well because they were just not ready. And there's no excuse for it. And, Woodson, had a very short press conference last night. He was clearly, very frustrated. And he just said there was no excuse, said the performance was BS, to keep it short. And there was no energy. They could not, guard the ball. And I know Iowa's a tough matchup for this team. With a team that does not have a traditional big man, does not favor IU because the fact that Trace Jackson Davis has to guard up top and has to, they play 4 out, 1 in, sometimes even 5 out. And off the pick and roll, every time Iowa had a screen, they'd find someone open and they'd make a shot in the first few minutes. And an 8-0 run, early, the first possession, Indiana gets 2 good looks from 3. Galloway had 1. I want to say it was Kopp or Hood-Schifino had the other. They got an offensive rebound. And then once it just doesn't go in and Iowa's hitting their threes, before you know it, it's an 8-0 start and Woodson's calling timeout. So I know it's not a favorable matchup, but it's inexcusable. There's no way around it. It's your final 2 games at home. It's Trace and all the other seniors. It's their final homestand, and you put up that performance, and the fans were clearly unhappy. A lot of them left early, and there was just no answer. Iowa's a good team. They've always had our number for the last few years now, and there's a reason for that. But there's a lot of questions after that game, after all the momentum we gained after Purdue, and to throw up that stinker, it's basically like, you're back at square one. It's almost like the win against Purdue practically gets washed away because of how bad that performance was. 22 points at home, you lose, and you give up 90 to an Iowa team that, I get it, they were coming off a huge win against Michigan State, scored 10 points in the final 35 seconds or something to win it in overtime. That was insane, and they had plenty of momentum as well. They've had some ups and downs this season, but just to have that happen at home, that's 2 losses now, and we said at the beginning of the year, you can maybe get 1 loss at home, and here we are at 2, and now Indiana is going to be fighting for a double bye after it looked like it was sealed, and it was they practically had one hand in the bag.
Yeah, man. If you look at that Iowa game, man, the first thing I noticed when analyzing it was like the box score was an exact flip-flop from the Purdue game. So this game, Indiana had 2 players in double figures. Iowa had 4 players in double figures. Iowa shot 58% from three, 56% from the field, and out-rebounded Indiana by 12. And Indiana only had 2 players in double figures, just like Purdue, and they shot 18% on the three-point line. So, the defense didn't show up, of course. I mean, Iowa was allowed to get a lot of what we call face cut baskets, where where players are falling asleep on the opposite side of the basketball. That's simply what it was. And I think it is hangover. It is. I think you're going to see a lot going forward in the years of teams winning huge games and then losing the next game because of the lack of focus, due to social media and a lot of, opportunities to read your press clippings more than ever. You can get on and you can tweet and you can read about how good you are, how great you are. You forget about what it took to win that particular basketball game. So I think you're going to see that a lot going forward. And I believe that's what happened, because when you have players who are daydreaming on the opposite side of the ball and people are face cutting, you're looking like the Indiana of the 90s and the 80s and the 70s, back cutting, getting easy baskets, then there's just a lack of focus on either communication or just simply focusing on that possession. And that's what you saw last night. Iowa's offense clicked. I mean, they found the ways to relieve pressure, cutting away from the ball. They made shots though. Indiana, I think Iowa knocked down the 3-point shot at a very, very high clip. And any team that's ever been able to make score 21 points, off of 3-point shots, I think Iowa had they were 13 of 23 from the 3-point line. And to be able to get that kind of separation using the 3-point line, I talked about this 2 years ago. First, Indiana has to become a team that can score consistently against anyone in order to get to that next level. I think we are rebuilding our culture. I think Mike Woodson is still finding their identity of Indiana basketball again. But as we move into recruiting and we move forward, we have to start getting guys that can score the basketball at a high clip, that don't need to run plays for them, that they can get in transition, get easy baskets, get defensive stops, and run. We just simply not running. And Iowa's a team that runs. They execute their offense at a high clip, and throwing it inside to Trace is cool. I think it's efficient. But 2 points, you hitting threes and we're making layups. That's a strategy that I'm going to live with too as a coach. We got to be able to find a way to balance it out and get 7 to 10 3-point makes per game. We were 2 for 11 last night. Our top 3-point shooters, I think Miller Kopp took maybe 1 3. I think Bates, Galloway took 4 threes. Bates took 1 3. If they're double teaming, how in the hell is we're only getting 11 3-point shots out of the double team? So we got to see if we're on that day. Can we get 15 to 17 up to see if we can make 5 or 6 of them and make this a game and find a rhythm? And I think that's what Iowa found, that rhythm. There's no answer for Chris Murray or Keegan Murray. Any Murray that they throw out there, we simply don't have the flexibility and the athleticism at that position, at the 3-4 position, to guard guys like Chris Murray. I remember I thought about that with Ron Harper Jr. and some of the guys. What's the player of the year candidate? I'm drawing a blank. Player of the candidate out of Penn State.
Pickett.
Jalen Pickett. These are tough matchups for us. When we beat Illinois, I was so happy Terrence Shannon Jr. didn't play, because that's the matchup that we get destroyed consistently, and we got to shore up that as we go forward. You're going to lose Trace Jackson Davis, but you're going to still have Malik Renew, hopefully, unless some NBA exec comes and tells him that he's a second-round pick and he's gone. But we have good inside play, but we have to find those wings that are versatile, that offensively can push tempo and hit 3-point shots. Defensively, they can guard 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and can rebound at that position and push the basketball and get our fast breaks going. So, it's rearing its ugly head here late in the season once again. But, at the end of the day, we talked about that earlier in the year. We can only lose 1 home game if we want to be Big Ten champions, and we had to win half of our Big Ten road games, which we didn't do. So this is what finds us in the position that we're in today. That's just the elements of the Big Ten on the road. It's very difficult. Jalen Hood-Schifino, man, we got to be able to put 2 good games together. You solidified yourself as a draft pick and all that good stuff. at Purdue, and then we come home and we look like we haven't scored over 15 points in our career before. We have to be able to as a friend. Now that's the freshman curse. That's hitting that's hitting that wall and people telling you how good you are, and you have to go out there and perform again and again and again. Man, I am so blessed that we didn't have social media and all that kind of stuff. Man, Bob Knight did a great job of keeping media out of our locker room and out of our gym, almost sometimes to the detriment of our own success. We didn't know how good we were. You know what I mean? So, but he, as players, because he kept all of that out of us, so we were able to be consistent in areas where we need to be consistent. But that's just a problem that those kids are going to have to deal with. Turn that stuff off. Don't be a part of it for 6 months, and just focus on winning basketball games as much as you can. So, I mean, obviously we lost the game. That drops us down. I think we're in like the 6th position right now. With other teams still have 2 games to play. We only have 1 game to play. Home game against Michigan senior night. But before we get to the home game against Michigan senior night, as you're looking at these tale of 2 games, what issues, if you're Mike Woodson, what things are you looking to correct going forward and going to the Michigan game in the Big Ten tournament?
I think the biggest thing, and it's kind of been this way all year, AJ, it's just been the cuts to the basket and sometimes just the straight line drives where you get beat. And there are times where I thought last night, on both sides of the ball, offensively, there are too many times where Indiana is picking up their dribble way too early. Where Trey Galloway, a guy who can get to the basket quickly, picks up his dribble quickly. Zach, I don't know if Mike Woodson made it clear that Zach Edey's not on Iowa, that there's not that big force down low, and there's Indiana was very timid, and there were too many times both Jalen and Trey and others just, did not want to get past these Iowa guards and this Iowa defense. And Iowa was, horrible road team before last night, really, really poor in the Big Ten this year away from Carver Hawkeye Arena. Just too many times where the guys were picking up their dribble and not getting a good shot that they wanted. And then, defense, it was the drives, it was the cuts to the basket. Too many guys just ball watching and not realizing that, someone's cutting. And as nice as the threes were, the twos were there as well. And we mentioned Jalen. There were 3 straight possessions on defense where he got beat. And that's really frustrating. And I know everyone's talking about a lottery pick. I certainly think he's, quite a ways away from a lottery pick. He's definitely going in the draft, probably in the first round without a doubt. But I think he's, maybe came down to earth a little bit. The biggest thing for me, I think, is rebounding. That's the thing that Indiana really needs to work on. And with, when come tournament time and come the Big Ten tournament, you're going to have to play against these 4-out-1-in kind of teams where Trace is going to have to play sometimes on the perimeter. But I think the biggest thing is pick and roll. They need to be able to switch better. There are too many times where Trace is isolated on the perimeter and the offense can go ISO. And even if they miss a shot, they can still potentially pull down an offensive rebound. I get it. Zach Edey's going to pull down all those rebounds. But the biggest thing was on the offensive glass, Iowa won last night 9-6, and they won rebounding as a whole by 12. They were plus 12 on the glass. That's unacceptable when there's not a true big man that they have. So the biggest thing is pick and roll for me on defense, guarding that perimeter and making sure that you're communicating and you're trying to get the right guy on guards. Because, give Iowa credit last night. They had a lot of contested shots early when Indiana was, playing good enough defense, and Trace was trying to do his best, when he was isolated and out from his usual home, which is in that paint. But I think pick and roll is the biggest thing Indiana needs to work on. Woodson said there's going to be a lot of film to review, as you'd expect. You got plenty of time to review. I think they said they have the day off today, Wednesday, so that's probably a good thing for the guys mentally, just to have 24 hours. Think about nothing, just, try and forget about that game and then get back to work tomorrow on Thursday. They got plenty of time to prepare for Michigan, but this is a team, Michigan, that in the last few matchups, the pick and roll has really bothered them. And in the first game this year, Indiana, they, got one, nail biter of his, 62-61, I think was the final in Ann Arbor, in a game that they stole, to be quite honest. I don't think they played well enough to win that game, but they got the stops they needed to at the very end. So the biggest thing, one, is pick and roll defensively, making sure you're switching, you're communicating, and you're just not getting beat, because there were too many times that happened last night. And offensively, I think it's, you mentioned it, they got to find more ways to shoot threes. And not every team's going to shoot the lights out like Iowa did. 13 of 23 is insane. They made more threes than we attempted. That's the real problem. You got to find a way to throw up more threes. Miller Kopp cannot be shooting only 1 3. So finding more than Trace Jackson Davis, Hunter Dickinson, and Trace is definitely better than Hunter Dickinson this season. So there's that matchup down low, but you got to find other guys to kick it out to because the double is going to come as it has all year. So got to find that open guy and you got to shoot it. There are times where Indiana makes that extra pass and they just don't shoot it. Where Miller Kopp, does his, one dribble and then shoots. Or too many times last night where he just straight up drove to the basket and threw up a kind of a weird runner and a teardrop, which that's not a shot. So you mentioned it, AJ. Have the confidence to shoot threes, take those shots from the outside, and if you take more, you're going to make more. And Indiana's a team that I know they don't play as fast as Iowa, but you got to get enough possessions to score enough points. And Michigan, they're a balanced team. Kobe Buffkin played really well. You got Jace Howard, as I mentioned, Dickinson down low. It's going to be a fun matchup on Senior Day, but there's a lot of work to do between now and Sunday at 4:30.
Yeah, man, it sounds like a broken record, man. But Kopp, Bates, and JHS have to consistently get busy from a production standpoint. They're just not being productive in key games at the end of the day. I mean, there's nothing we can say threes. We can say I don't care what you do, but you can't come out of the game with. I think they came out of the game with. I think Kopp had 4 points. Race had 4 points. Galloway 7 points. Tamar Bates 2 points. I mean, JHS he finished with I think JHS finished with 8 points. That's just not going to get it done. I mean, Trace Jackson Davis finished with 26 points, 13 rebounds. I mean, I'm happy with that if I'm the other team, okay? You cut the water off from the others, and this guy, and he got his money, but they lost the basketball game. And that's the strategy. That's the bottom line. They have to help and create easier baskets just out of broken plays, out of rebounds, out of steals. You have to do something. You can't walk the ball up and go high-low every single possession for the rest of the year. It's just not. This is not the 1990s and the late 80s. We have to spread this floor, figure out a way to get drives to the basket, get fouled, get to the free throw line. I'm not sure how many times we got to the free throw line last night. We did get to the free throw line 20 times last night, but most of those came from Trace Jackson Davis and Malik Renew. So they shot 14 of those 20 free throws. That means no one else is getting to the free throw line. One thing Bob Knight teams are always good at. We were always a good rebounder team, defensive teams, and we always got to the free throw line a lot, which gives you a chance to be in the game to win a lot of basketball games. So they have to look at that. But those guys have to put up shots. Bates, Kopps, JHS, they have to find ways to get easier baskets to relieve the pressure off of Trace Jackson Davis so he can get some run-outs and runs to the floor, runs out. They have to be able to match these high-octane three-point shooting teams. Northwestern drilled us from three-point line. Iowa drilled us from three-point line. We have to be able to supplement that by making three-point shots ourselves. We can't go out there and have 2 threes and they have 13. That's 26-6. I mean, come on, we're not able to sustain in that way. TJD will always be the rock inside scoring and playing, but playing strictly out of double teams is not something that's going to help us going forward. Like I said, it's always like a pro field. Throw it in, let's rotate, but a lot of times kids don't have that pro mentality to do their job to just shoot when they get the basketball. So you have to keep doing this over and over again, which leads to plays that are dragged out, man. So we have to fix those things. And defensively, we have to. I mean, we have to always give teams a pass when defensively they've been really good, and then they had that game where it seems like nothing works. And because you have to understand that these teams and these coaches are game planning to figure out how to score against your defense, since it's one of the tops in the conference, since it's one of the tops in the country. So, but in those games where you have those defensive lows and you don't play well defensively, you got to figure out a way to stay in the game offensively. Then you got to figure out ways. So those things happen. But we just didn't. 68 points is not nearly enough. Getting blown out in your home floor that bad is a bad look. I think that's why Mike Woodson was teed off. I mean, I would be embarrassed, and they should have been embarrassed to see that. But it's something that we can easily fix, man. So we kind of talked about what's next. We got Michigan coming up senior night. It's a game that they only won by 2. Got lucky, like you talked about. It was low scoring. I think it was to a 68-67 win or something like that by 2. Going into that game, you have to be able to understand what's at stake. Like a double bye. You still got a lot going on. It's a jumbled mess in between, I believe the 2 spot and I believe the 8 spot or 9 spot is a jumbo mess. So anybody can end up anywhere based on all these tie breaks and all these games like that. So you got to be able to improve. One shining spot was we saw Xavier Johnson looking good in warmups, man. Are you hearing anything on campus about Xavier?
They say Sunday, he was dressed and ready to go. And I thought Woodson said he didn't ever said he was out, but said he wouldn't play. But, he was dressed. He was the first one out of the huddle. And really right before the game, he was really in that huddle. He was the 6th guy. So I thought he was going to be ready to go. But, Woodson sat him, and he definitely would have played in that game very early on, considering they were just getting beat to the basket. And that's something X does well. But they're saying Sunday is the day he comes back. You would think for a senior day like him, I know there's a chance he could redshirt. I think there's a possibility if he gets a waiver from the NCAA. So his family and him have to make a decision, but everyone's saying Sunday. So interesting to see how, he fits into this role with only, one regular season game. And you hope for Indiana 2 or 3 Big Ten games and a few March Madness games in there as well. But, that's a big decision for Woodson and co, considering he hasn't played since the middle of December in a few minutes against Kansas. Only played, I believe, in really 10 full games this season. So it's a big decision that's going to be made. It's a good problem to have, but I'm glad I'm not in Woodson's shoes having to make that one.
Right, man. So let's help XJ can get back and make a contribution, man. Go for in closing, man. Mike Woodson, I just encourage him continue to do what you've been doing defensively, but kind of scratch that one out. Look at the mistakes, fix them. But offensively, man, play with more pace. Empower the others, man, and take more chances offensively. I mean, at this point, you're not going to win a Big Ten title. So it's like at the end of the day, you can kind of, push the kids to have a little more fun, push the kids to take more chances. All these kids were, great players and scorers on the high school teams. So they have a little bit inside of them where they're able to take that role and to take more shots and to try to be a little bit more efficient taking those shots. But, in order for us to take that next level, we have to empower those kids. We're not going to win a championship or make a deep run throwing the ball inside. It's just not going to work that way. You have to figure out ways to create more offense. And I think we have some of the firepower to do so. We saw it in some of the games earlier in the year, and it just kind of slowly but surely got back to where we've been over the last 3-4 years. That's low scoring, slow pace, walk the ball up, throw it inside, let TJD make decisions. And I don't see the great teams playing that style of basketball and it being effective. We have to, do it by committee. I like TJD numbers to go down a little bit, but his production in the other categories to go up and him to have more energy to perform at the end of basketball games and big games as well. So, but we'll see. We'll see. We're excited about our Hoosiers, man. We want the best for our Hoosiers, but sometimes you just got to flush a loss and move on and focus on the next game, man. And get that angry film session out, get it out the way, and start preparing for senior night versus Michigan and the subsequent Big Ten tournament. Any thoughts going out, Austin, as we close?
I mean, it was in Indiana's hands to get that, double bye. Now it's out of their hands. So, they're going to know a lot by Sunday. There's a lot of things that will be sorted out. But you mentioned it. There's a possibility they finish, I believe, as high as second. I believe, I don't know if that's actually still in the cards after the loss, but with all the tiebreakers and whatnot, and there's a chance they finish 9th, which is where they were last year. So there's a lot of motivation. A bit worried that, they have 5 days, and that could be a lot to sulk on this one. As you mentioned, as a player, you'd want to, be right back out there the next day and forget about it. So, but I mean, hey, it's senior day. The guys are going to want to play for, those leaders on the team. Trace's final home game, that'll be quite the sight and quite the ovation that he will get. So guys just got to play around him and, put it all out there, 40 more minutes to see where you end up. And hopefully, fingers crossed they get that double bye, but it looks like they might have to play on that Thursday. But hey, either way, they've, done what they needed to do after a 1-4 start. I thought there was no way they'd be here. And, here they are with 12 wins or 11 wins with the opportunity to get 12. So it's more than they had last year, right around where we predicted at the beginning of the season. So, hey, good for us. But, everything will be decided Sunday. And before you know it, we'll be getting ready for Chicago for the Big Ten tourney.
Absolutely, man. Good luck to the Hoosiers coming up against Michigan. Continue to support our Hoosiers. Continue to support the podcast. Check us out on Facebook. On my Facebook fan page. You can check us out me on Twitter at Field of 68 Network. You can check on Austin's Twitter handle, all the places, YouTube as well, to catch the visual version of our podcast. Man, keep supporting the House of Hoosier podcast. Keep supporting the Hoosiers. Thank you, House of Hoosier podcast.